Bickley and Amar'e mornings. Arizona sports. The local sports leader. Bickley Blast.
To all the young Suns fans who still believe all baskets are the same, to all the DeAndre Ayton stans who see no difference between finger rolls and thunderous dunks, allow me to present Amar'e Stoudemire. Stoudemire will soon be elevated to the team's Ring of Honor. He'll be inducted alongside former teammate Sean Marion, who was like the original Mikal Bridges, only bigger. A guy who was goofy, lovable, could defend any position on the floor and kill you in transition. But Stoudemire was a beast, a guy who attacked the rim with the ferocity that terrorized and posterized his opponents. His dunks would make other teams cower and run for cover while filling his teammates with alpha male fuel and swagger. Stoudemire lost his father at age 12. He was constantly on the move as a child, attending 6 different schools before jumping to the NBA from high school, and he once told me that dunking was therapy for him, allowing him to release all that pent-up aggression from his hardscrabble upbringing. He was awesome, and if I were Frank Vogel, I would lock Ayton into a room and make him watch the first 3 seasons of Stat, and then Ayton would finally know what he needs to tap into. But for now, I am just thankful the Suns are honoring these 2 players because at one team, that team meant the world to the Valley. And even though they never played for a championship, its trio of stars are now together in the rafters, honored for an eternity.
Yeah, thunderous dunks and Amar'e Stoudemire go hand in hand.
There was a playoff series against the Grizzlies. I forget who he dunked on, but the dunk quite literally killed the Memphis. Well, literally, sorry, quite unliterally, metaphorically killed the Memphis Grizzlies. Anybody who was there and covered that game will tell you the same thing. And he had that power to do it. And It's if DeAndre Ayton could ever get a little of Amar'e Stoudemire, and their upbringings are dramatically different. You can't expect DA to be motivated by the things that motivated Amar'e Stoudemire. But to me, that's sort of the player that DA could become and could give the Phoenix Suns. So I think about that. I think about those 2 guys together and how unique that basketball team was. That 04-05 Suns team, Vinny, they had a point guard who revolutionized the position, and Steve Nash. They had a head coach who revolutionized the NBA by playing Sean Marion a 3 at the 4 and Stoudemire a 4 at the 5. So he basically invented small ball, positionless basketball with an emphasis on 3-point shooting and just shoot as much as you can. Right?
Sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound like a big deal now.
Not now, but they were.
But in 04 it was.
Oh, they were way ahead of their time. And the famous story for Suns fans who don't know this, you and I and veteran Suns fans obviously do, is so this whole thing in 04 started in the gym, and people like myself and Gambo, we got phone calls from Brian Colangelo, and it was like, get down here, we have got magic cooking down here. So we did, and it happened. That team came out of the gates, and they just smoked everybody, right? Just absolutely smoked everybody. But in that summertime, Mike D'Antoni was like, you know what? I don't have a center, but I got a starting 5 that really feels right to me, and I got to run this by Jerry. I can't go into the season with, playing all these guys out of position and hoping for the best. So Mike D'Antoni went out to lunch with Jerry Colangelo, and he was very nervous, and he broached this idea. Hey, Jerry, would you not fire me if I started Amar'e Stoudemire at the 5 and Sean Marion at the 4 and just played our best 5 players regardless of how small we are? And he said, do it. Go for what you know, Holmes. That's not.
And
quoting.
That's a direct
classic.
That's not quoting Jerry.
Classic Jerry Colangelo.
Yeah, classic Jerry. Right.
That is so Jerry.
Yeah. But he said he gave him his blessings, and then we were off and running. That team won 62 games. They were like 31-4, and their average margin of victory for the first 35 games was like 23 points a game.
Yeah.
Blew people's minds. So to me, and that team, and this is why it's so important to me, that team's legacy was a legacy of heartbreak.
Yes.
The Joe Johnson orbital eye fracture that ruined that 04-05 season. I
call it a broken face.
That too.
Yeah, heartbreak, eye break, etc.
I am convinced the Suns were the best team in basketball that year. There were a couple years where I was convinced of it. But that 04-05 year, I thought they were better than the Spurs. And that Joe Johnson injury derailed everything. And then there were the suspensions and the Steve Nash bloody nose and all the stupidity, right? To me, it's great that these three are getting honored because it really does kind of immortalize a team that meant the world to the Valley and a nucleus that meant the world to the Valley even without the championship.
But go back to even before that 04-05 team, how Amar'e Stoudemire landed in Phoenix. And he was one of the most talked about players in that draft class because of what you brought up in the Blast, and that is how many different schools? Six different high schools.
Six.
I mean, he was wearing a different jersey every week, it seemed like. And it seemed like he had been labeled as this is a risky pick. The Suns at number 9 get him. And isn't it amazing that the riskiest pick, back when you broke it down in 2002, turned out to be the best pick of that draft? Here are the 8 players that went before Amar'e Stoudemire. And this probably just made the Suns' mind up for them. Yao Ming went 1. Jay Williams 2. Tragically had his career cut short after a motorcycle accident. Mike Dunleavy to the Warriors at 3. Drew Gooden to Memphis at 4. Nicolas Skidishvili to Denver at 5. DeJuan Wagner to Cleveland at 6. Nene went to the Knicks at 7. Chris Wilcox to the Clippers at 8. And I remember people being upset that Chris Wilcox wasn't there for the Suns to pick at number 9.
Maryland, great.
Yes.
Wow.
Sixth man.
And then you think, was Sean Marion drafted the year before?
He was drafted in 99.
So 2 years.
3 years earlier.
3 years earlier.
Yeah.
When you paired up Marion and Stoudemire, those were 2 draft picks. Both of them were kind of out of nowhere. Sean Marion played at UNLV. And you couldn't have gotten better foresight as an organization than to draft those 2 guys in that short window.
Also, because Sean Marion was on the previous sort of regime of the Suns for a couple of years before that 7.
Yeah.
So the fact that he fit so perfectly into this new style of play worked out great.
Yeah. And after they had all these guys, it was the road trip to Dallas to kind of rescue Steve Nash from Mark Cuban that made it all work. But to me, it always felt incomplete that Steve Nash was the only guy immortalized from that era.
Yeah.
D'Antoni next?
I had that in my notes. I wrote that down, Jarrett. Like now that, and people have been clamoring for this for a while, for these 2 to get their honor. They're both going to get it this year. Who does go in next? It's probably Mike D'Antoni.
I don't know about that.
No?
I don't know about that.
If it's not him, I don't know if there's a clear-cut candidate.
Then you wait for a while.
You wait for a while. Yeah.
Chris Paul?
Ooh. What a question that is. Landry Shamet?
Here's another weird thing about the synergy between Marion and Stoudemire. You mentioned that draft position. Both drafted at number 9 in their respective draft years. Both, in terms of win shares for a career, the highest number in their draft class. And I remember in 99, and you probably remember this too, the debate about they're going to take Sean Marion, the guy from UNLV with that funky shot. They're going to take him over Corey Maggette.
Oh, that's right.
And they did. And Corey Maggette had a decent career in the NBA, but he was no Sean Marion.
Yeah. That's great. And listen, so I've heard from the owner that Sean Marion and Amar'e Stoudemire were over the moon that they were being honored like this. So I couldn't be happier about this story, to be honest with you.
Yeah, the only thing bad about it, my son brought this up to me yesterday, is like he's still sick over the fact that Amar'e Stoudemire retired as a New York Knick and not a Sun. But again,
we could get into that.
That's an ownership question.
Talk about ownership question. It took 10 years after Al McCoy was elected in the Basketball Hall of Fame to get into the Ring of Honor.
Yeah.
Could somebody explain that to me?
No. There's no explanation.
There is none.